Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Salman Anjum at my YouTube channel, and the topic we are going to talk about is one of the organ systems, which is human digestive system. Well, as the name is indicating, that this system is about digestion, and digestion means to break. For example, when we eat some food, it has larger pieces, and those larger pieces are converted physically as well as chemically into smaller components, and that process is called digestion. And of course, if you think about that, why digestion is so important, well, the reason is that when we eat some food, for example, from the outside, that is quite larger in size, and our cells, they are quite smaller in size. So we basically want that the food we eat should ultimately go into our cells. So that is the purpose that we means our system, our digestive system continues to break down the food that we eat to make it so small that it enters into very tiny, very small cells, and ultimately that gives us some energy. So this is the purpose of this digestive system. One is to digest something, and then to that it becomes absorbable, and finally it is assimilated. Digestion means to break down something into smaller components. Absorption means that those smaller components has been absorbed and they go into bloodstream, and assimilation means that from the bloodstream they go ultimately into cells, and there they are utilized finally to give us ATP. So systematically, our digestive system is basically a long tube, and at multiple points there are different organs which are connected with each other. So overall thing is called digestive tract. So the components basically are, it is starting from mouth, then it is going into throat, and this is the opening of the throat that is called pharynx, and that is then leading into esophagus. Esophagus is basically your food pipe that is taking the food into stomach, and you know about stomach, that stomach can store the food for some time, and then from the stomach the food is going into small intestine, and then into large intestine, and finally into the last part of the large intestine that is called rectum, and finally out of the body, anus. So of course, in this topic we are going to talk about and discuss the role of all of these components in some detail. And not only there are these organs basically which are involved in different function, but also there is a role of other organs or glands which are sitting on the side of this digestive tract. Namely, they are salivary gland, which are present in our mouth, and their job is to release or produce saliva. Saliva is basically a liquid, and its job is to basically liquefy or slightly soften the food that we eat, and also this contains some enzymes which have chemical digestive function. And then there is liver. Food does not enter into liver, but liver is sitting on the side, and liver is basically sending its chemicals into the food pipe or digestive tract basically, so that the food is further processed or digested. Similarly, pancreas is also sitting around intestine, and pancreas is also sending in its chemicals into the intestine so that they help in the digestion of the food. Gallbladder is also sitting next to liver, and its job is to store the chemicals which are produced by liver, and then whenever required, then gallbladder sends those chemicals into small intestine to help digestion. So all of these components, they are sitting on the side of the digestive tract, and they are contributing strongly towards digestion of the food, but food does not enter into these things because they are sitting on the side of the digestive tract. Food stay into that long pipe digestive tract, but these things, they basically send their chemicals into that digestive tract, as you can see here in this diagram. For example, if you look more closely here, you can see the digestive tract is starting from mouth, and inside mouth there are teeth present, there are salivary glands present, and then this pipe is going downward through the esophagus into stomach, and through stomach it is leading into small and large intestine. So on this side there is liver, there is gallbladder, and there is pancreas, which are sitting on the side, and they are contributing their liquids into the digestive tract. Okay, so digestive system's role is not only to mechanically break down the food, but ultimately to chemically break down the food. For example, when you eat something, you start chewing in the mouth, and chewing basically with the help of teeth, it is physically breaking down the food. For example, you eat some bread or some fruit, so you are eating larger chunks which are being mechanically or physically broken down by teeth into smaller pieces. And then there is saliva present, and saliva contains some chemicals, and those chemicals, they are reacting with your food, and they are chemically breaking down your food into its monomers. Mechanically, the food cannot be converted into monomers, but larger chunks can be converted into smaller ones, while chemically the food can be converted into monomers. Why I'm saying monomers, I give you the example of starch. When you eat bread, that means you are eating starch. So larger chunks of starch, mechanically they are converted into smaller pieces of starch, but they remain as starch. But with the help of saliva, the starch is chemically converted into glucose. Before it was starch, but chemically it is broken down into glucose, and you start to feel sweeter taste into your mouth. So this way, carbohydrates that we eat, the protein that we eat, and fats and anything that we eat is broken mechanically and chemically through the digestive system. So not only mouth is chemically or mechanically digesting the food, but every component of the digestive system, for example, stomach, intestine, everything is doing the same mechanical and chemical processing of the food. Yeah, of course, there are no teeth present. There are no teeth present in the stomach or intestine, but still, stomach and intestine, they have the capability to even mechanically process the food, and for sure chemically. So there are present basically enzymes for digestion, and they chemically break down the food. If I define enzyme for you, enzymes are basically biological catalysts, and their job is to basically speed up the chemical reaction. They increase the speed of the reaction so that the reaction is processed or completes in a unit time, in some small amount of time. Let's say if enzymes were not present, it would become very difficult or too much time consuming to digest the food. But with enzyme, the time is reduced drastically. That is why enzymes are really, really important. So this is what enzymes are doing. You can see scissors here. So enzymes are basically chemical scissors, and they break down chemically the food. For example, this scissor is basically the enzyme, and it is converting the larger piece of the food, which is this long, into smaller pieces, and ultimately those smaller pieces are finally converted into their individual monomers. In this example, they are taking protein. This is long protein converted into short protein, and then short protein is finally broken down into amino acids. So of course, digestion is starting in mouth with the help of teeth. You are physically breaking down the food, and of course there are multiple teeth of different type. They have their individual role, but we are not going to discuss about which teeth are doing what. But of course their job is to physically break down the food, and there is saliva, which is chemically breaking down the food because saliva contains enzymes. And then the food is entering into the esophagus. Esophagus is your food pipe, and it's a long pipe, and it has a function of squeezing the food towards stomach. So that squeezing is called peristalsis. And there is another mechanism that runs whenever there is something wrong goes with your digestive system, and that process is reversed, and that is called antiperistalsis. Antiperistalsis means when you feel a vomit-like condition. So vomiting is the result of antiperistalsis. So normally it is just peristalsis that squeezes the food from your mouth through the esophagus into stomach. And of course you can witness how antiperistalsis feels when there is a vomiting condition. So ultimately the food reaches into stomach. So how stomach looks like? It's like a big chamber. It's a long, big sac-like thing that has the capability not only to store the food, but also to squeeze the food. Stomach contains enzymes, and stomach also contains acid that help digestion. So this acid is so strong, which is present inside stomach, that not only it helps in digestion of protein, for example, but also it kills the microbes which come along with the food. So it is kind of a natural protective mechanism by the body that it contains acid. So like fortunately we have acid, and acid can kill most of the microbes which are coming into stomach, and we stay protected. But that does not mean that we start eating whatever the type of food it is and all the microbes will be killed by the acid. Of course we need to be very careful, and there should not be any food poisoning caused by any you can say spoiled food if we eat. So we need to eat from the good, and also we need to cook the food properly so that all the microbes are killed to make sure. And then still, if airborne microbes, they go along with when we start eating the food, and they are then finally killed by the acid present inside our stomach. Finally, the food leaves stomach and goes into small intestine, and the food which is leaving the stomach is called chyme. Chyme is the final shape after being processed into stomach. And of course, there is acid present in the stomach. That is why the food which is leaving the stomach becomes quite acidic, and it goes into small intestine. I would ask you here, have you ever seen chyme? Well, you would have if someone does vomiting. So the type of acidic food or pungent food it throws out of its stomach, out of the mouth, it basically is the form of chyme that was present in the stomach. This is how the chyme looks like. So there they are showing the beautiful stomach. Stomach is starting from here where esophagus is ending. So this is a sac-like organ that has the capability to store the food, and ultimately at this point it is connected with small intestine, as you can see here as well. So the food, as I told you, is leaving the stomach and going into small intestine. But you know that the food which is leaving stomach is quite acidic, and small intestine cannot process the acidic food. That is why the pancreas sends in bicarbonates. Pancreas produces bicarbonates, and it sends in bicarbonates into small intestine so that these bicarbonates get mixed with the acidic food coming from the stomach. When these two things they react together, the food it is reduced with its acidity, and that is why the small intestine can process that food. If the food remains acidic and no bicarbonates would be there, the small intestine would not be able to process that food. Secondly, not only pancreas sends in the bicarbonates, pancreas also produces some digestive enzymes. So this way, pancreas contributes to the digestion. The food is not entering into pancreas. Food is going from the stomach into small intestine. But pancreas is sitting on the side, and pancreas is throwing its bicarbonate as well as digestive enzymes into small intestine so that these two things they get mixed with the food coming from the stomach, and in the small intestine their acidity is reduced and they start getting digested because of these enzymes. So where you can find pancreas? There it is. It is stomach. Stomach is going into small intestine here, and there is sitting the pancreas. So pancreas is sitting at the edge of where stomach is connected with the small intestine, and it is throwing in its enzyme and bicarbonate to help the intestine to process the acidic food. But acidity is reduced, of course, because of bicarbonates produced by pancreas. Okay, so the food now is there in the small intestine. So first of all, how small intestine it looks like. Small intestine is a long tube and it is muscular. Inside, if you look the small intestine from the inside there are finger-like projections in the small intestine, and those finger-like projections are called villi. Because of villi, the surface area of the small intestine is larger than the overall size it has. Although it is quite long, but still it is even longer because of the presence of villi inside the small intestine. So villi are finger-like things. They are just like the threads on a towel. So because of those small threads which are present on the towel, so towel gets the capability to soak more water or to get touch with more water. That means the surface area of the towel is increased because of small threads which are just coming out of the towel. In the same way, there are finger-like projections present in the small intestine. So the surface area is increased, and because of the surface area is increased, so this thing facilitates in the absorption of the food which is digested. So this is the purpose of the small intestine, not only to digest the food but also to finally absorb the digested food. So here, this is how the small intestine looks like. It is quite long, and it is made further long from the inside because of these villi-like things, projections. So these thread-like structures inside small intestine, they basically are covered by the blood capillaries. Because ultimately the food has to be absorbed from the small intestine to go into the blood. That is why these thread-like things present in the small intestine, they are covered by blood tubings. So at this point, I would like to mention one thing, that this is my question to you, that which kind of food is processed in which kind of organ. For example, if you are eating carbohydrate, protein, and lipids, so at which place they are mostly digested? Okay, the answer is the carbohydrates, they are digested in mouth as well as in the intestine, small intestine, while the proteins, they are digested in the stomach, while lipids, they are digested in the small intestine. So that is the reason that you start to feel the taste of the carbohydrates if you are eating, let's say, starch, because starch starts to convert into glucose in your mouth, and glucose feels sweeter in taste. Okay, so as I mentioned before, that there is another organ which is liver as well as gallbladder, and they are also contributing in digestion. They are also helping digestion in the small intestine. So what liver is doing? Liver is producing a liquid that is called bile, and that liquid is stored in the gallbladder. So the liquid of liver is called bile, which remains stored in the gallbladder, and whenever the food is there in the small intestine, that bile comes into small intestine from the gallbladder so that it helps in digestion. As well as there is a role of liver not only to support digestion but also to break down toxins and also to store materials like glucose or glycogen, and also liver produces bile that helps in digestion. So these are two other roles of liver apart from digestive role, which is through bile. Liver is also contributing in otherwise, like to break down toxin or storing minerals or other food, and also it is contributing towards digestion. So bile is made by liver, stored in gallbladder, and released in the small intestine, and majorly it helps in digestion of fats or lipids. As I mentioned before, that carbohydrates, they mostly are digested in mouth as well as in small intestine, while proteins in the stomach and lipids or fats in the small intestine with the help of the components, the liquid bile coming from liver. And remember that gallbladder does not produce any liquid. Gallbladder is just there to store the liquid which is called bile produced by liver. And on this diagram you can very clearly see that there is present liver, and in green you can see the gallbladder. And gallbladder is throwing the liquid bile into small intestine, not into stomach but into small intestine. Okay, then the food finally enters into large intestine. So most of the digested food has been absorbed from the small intestine. So anything remaining which is undigested, that goes into large intestine. So large intestine has the capability to store and squeeze the food and compact the food, as well as to absorb any water if required. So ultimately the undigested food is converted into feces or stools, and finally those feces and stools produced by the large intestine, they are squeezed and they go into the final part of this large intestine which is called rectum, and finally they are squeezed out of the body through the final opening which is called anus. Okay, so there is a question: what is the benefit of eating fibers in the food? How they support digestion? Basically the fibers, we get it from different food, for example fruits or their peels. They are not digested by our body basically. So fibers, they remain mostly undigested and they get mixed with the food that we eat, and they don't allow the food to make clumps. So this way the food which is mixed with fibers, it is not converted into constipation. So this way fibers, they keep the food particles or they keep the undigested food particles away from each other. And even if some water is absorbed, because of the fiber, the food would not be converted into hard clumps, and so constipation is not happening when we eat. That is why it is very important that we should include certain vegetables like salad or fruit into our daily meal, so that we are taking in some fibers, and people who are having this problem of continuous or occasional constipation, that is relieved. So finally there is this large intestine on the side, you can see, and the final part is called rectum, and finally the opening is called anus. So whenever we talk about certain organ systems, of course we need to talk about certain diseases or disorders associated with them. It is important, it is a fundamental study, because otherwise it would become difficult for us to treat those people who are having such kind of problem, unfortunately. One of the problem or disorder associated with the digestive system is ulcer. Ulcer is basically inflammation of, for example, inside stomach. It may happen inside small intestine, and that inflammation is so strong that because of the acidity inside stomach and also because of certain microbes, this ulcer may convert into some cancer. As well as you must have heard about liver disorders. Liver is a very strong contributing organ in the digestive process. Also, liver has other important role for the body. So liver disorders, they affect liver efficiency, and liver disorder can be hepatitis B, hepatitis C, or liver cancer. Diarrhea, of course, it affects strongly in a way that during diarrhea a lot of water is released. So basically small and large intestine, they become unable to absorb water, and finally the water is getting released with the food, and the person becomes deficient of water, and this thing can become toxic at some point. That is why those people, they have to continue drinking water, a lot of water, as well as salts, because salts are also being released, they are not being absorbed, so they continue to go out of the body because of water release. And constipation is opposite to diarrhea, and you know about constipation, that during constipation a lot of water is absorbed by the small and large intestine, and the food clumps are made, and they cause pain, as well as they can lead to further complications of the large intestine. Appendicitis. Appendix is a pseudo organ which is present along with the digestive system, and appendix is not functional in the human being, but still it is present, of course, as a pseudo organ. So if some food particle or something is trapped, unfortunately, inside appendix, that may convert into some strong pain, and that condition is called appendicitis. So that may be quite you can say toxic for human being or for the patient at some point. So that is why if appendicitis is confirmed by the doctor, so appendix has to be surgically removed from the body, since it has no function, or so far not any known function. So that is why when doctors, they remove it, so there is no harm done with the digestive process. Finally is the colon cancer. Colon is the part of large intestine, and the cancer of large intestine is called colon cancer. And of course, you know, cancer is always dangerous, so cancer has its own complications for the body. So it was all about digestive system, and if you have any questions so far, please do not hesitate to ask me. Thank you so much.